This is Carson Edwards from the Boston Celtics, and you're listening to the Boiler Breakdown podcast hosted by Tanner Lee, Evan Webb, and Andrew Eiler.
Here's the snap, the placement, and the boot. It is up. It is good. It's good. It's good. It's good. 4 seconds to go. Travis Dorsch has the monkey off his back. Purdue leads Michigan 32-31.
It is Tuesday, August 25th, 2020, and you're listening to another edition of the Boiler Breakdown podcast. I'm Tanner Lee, along with Evan Webb, and we're really excited to be bringing a special guest along with us tonight. That's Purdue place kicker and punter from 1998 to 2001, the all-time career scoring points leader with 355, career field goal leader with 69, career punt average with 48.4, the only Purdue athlete to have kicked a field goal, threw a touchdown, hit a home run, and record a win as a pitcher, the 2001 Ray Guy Award winner, All-American punter Travis Dorsch. Travis, thanks for joining us this evening.
All of that seems like it was so long ago.
Well, that's just a couple of the accolades I have written down. I mean, you had a brilliant career as a football player for the Boilermakers, which we will get into in a little bit. But where are you coming from this evening, and what are you up to nowadays?
Yeah, I'm hiding in our basement. It's bedtime. I'm not here in Utah, and my wife and my in-laws are helping me out tonight by getting the kiddos to bed. So happy to be joining you back on the East Coast, and looking forward to our chat. Yes.
So you are in Utah. What do you do now as a profession?
Yeah, so I'm a associate professor at Utah State University, and I'm the founding director of the Families in Sport Lab. So, I teach classes here at the university, and we do a lot of research in the youth sports space, looking at family relationships, parent-child relationships, coach-athlete relationships, and just trying to make youth sport a better place for that next generation coming up.
Very, very neat. What was your major at Purdue?
I was a developmental psychology major, and then I actually stayed at Purdue and did my master's and PhD both in kinesiology with an emphasis on sport and exercise psychology.
Wow. Very impressive. Very impressive. So you're originally from Montana. Why Purdue?
Nobody's going to get that information anymore. You'd have to ask Coach Tiller, and sadly he's not around to say. But, I think Coach Tiller played at Montana State University, which is in Bozeman, where I'm from, and obviously coached for a bit at Wyoming. So he knew the Rocky Mountain region well, and it wasn't necessarily a surprise that he recruited me, but maybe it was a surprise that I chose Purdue. But I feel blessed every day that I did. When it came down to it, I was being recruited by a number of schools in baseball, basketball, and football, and the opportunity for a kid from out west to come to the Big Ten and play football, I just couldn't turn that down. And that it seemed like the right thing at the time. And again, very, very blessed I made that choice.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe you are the only Purdue football player ever to be from the state of Montana.
You probably know better than I. I think I would know anybody else if that were the case. So I do know we had actually a punter that followed me. Aaron Levin was from Casper, Wyoming. And I know we've had a couple from Idaho and maybe even one of the Dakotas, but yeah, I can't recall one from Montana.
And I'm guessing the another draw to Purdue had to be that the basketball on grass style offense. Being a kicker, you knew they were going to put up a lot of points.
Yeah, it seemed like that at the time. My recruiting year was Coach Tiller's first year when they had a really nice run, beat Notre Dame, went to the Alamo Bowl and beat Oklahoma State, and that was really sort of everybody's introduction to Purdue under Coach Tiller. And I was excited to come into the next recruiting class. And we, of course, had some success that first year and beat Kansas State in our second trip to the Alamo Bowl. So, and then everybody, of course, knows about the Rose Bowl 2 years later with Drew and that class. So, yeah, just a really nice time to be at Purdue. It was a fun 4 years for me, overlapping with guys like Drew and Matt Light and Chuck Jacoby, Aiken Adel, and then, some of the younger guys who came in the classes below me, Stu Schweigert, John Standifer, those guys. And it just some really, really big names that people recognize when they think about Purdue football, that late 90s to mid 2000 stretch.
So when you were coming to Purdue or getting recruited by Purdue, did you think you would have an opportunity to do both, be a kicker and a punter, or was there one that you thought you might get more time at than the other?
I don't think I knew right away, and I don't think the coaches knew right away. They knew I was raw. I knew I was raw. I had never really focused on either of the positions. I'd sort of just been an athlete who did them. So coming into that first training camp as a freshman, there was a lot of skill yet to be developed. They knew my ceiling was high, but the consistency wasn't always there. And they just kind of threw me out there and said, let's see what sticks. And as a freshman, they got on the field as a place kicker, freshman and sophomore. We had Danny that was punting for us, and he was 2 years ahead of me. So he handled those duties for the first 2 years. And then, Scott Kurz and I handled them the next couple of years, my junior and senior year.
Did you have?
Sorry, go ahead, Dan. I was say, were you recruited for any other positions like outside of Purdue for football?
Yeah, I was being recruited as a wide receiver to some universities. Actually, University of Colorado comes to mind. I didn't have blazing speed by any means. I was a possession type receiver. You think in the mold of like a Chris Daniels at Purdue. So yeah, I had some opportunities there, but not at schools that I considered, as big time as Purdue or the Big Ten. And then of course some of the hometown schools, Montana State and Montana, were recruiting me sort of all over the map in every different sport. So, I sort of just had a decision to make whether I wanted to try and go be a smaller fish in a big pond initially, or be a big fish in a small pond. And I think it worked out beautifully.
Did you have the same special team coordinator all throughout your 4 years at Purdue?
I did. It was Scott Downing, and Scott came to Purdue with Joe Tiller from Wyoming. Scott later went on to Nebraska, and I can't even remember all the schools he went to. I think he ended his coaching career at Liberty, and now he's in college administration. So yeah, he was with us all 4 years at Purdue, and really became, for me, being so far from home, a trusted mentor, or kind of a father figure. And I got to, feel like I was watch his kids grow up, be part of his family. And he was just always a really strong influence on me. He was a great coach.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, because I think Coach Jeff Brom's going on his fourth special teams coordinator already. So
I keep waiting for my phone to ring, but I think they got a good one now, and they've had some good ones in the past too that have left for one reason or another. But consistency, I think, is the name of the game, especially with specialists. You want to build that trust and rapport, and you want to kind of have one system that you're building from. So hopefully this is the time, and hopefully they get to play ball soon. So we'll see.
Looking at your freshman year in 1998, you guys had a really good season. Like you already hit on, you went 9-4. It took down a number 4 ranked Kansas State Wildcats in the Alamo Bowl. Kind of Drew Brees, hello world, I guess, to the whole nation outside of Big Ten country with that touchdown pass to Isaac Jones there. You had a pretty good season as a freshman, 48 for 50 on extra points and 16 for 22 on field goals. Does any particular game or moment stick out from your freshman year?
Yeah, it's such a blur as a freshman. You're kind of wide-eyed. A couple of moments that stick out to me is obviously the opener, my first time out there as a college athlete, my first extra point at USC. It's 196 degrees on the field, and I adjusted enough to get it up over the line and through the uprights. And I think from there I sort of felt like, okay, the nerves are gone. I can do this. I can play at this level, and we move forward from there. The second thing that sticks out to me is sort of that same, do I belong sort of a feeling at Notre Dame when you walk into the stadium and, you look around and it's touchdown Jesus and it's Notre Dame, it's the Golden Dome. And that was kind of my breakout game actually as a freshman. I think I had 3 field goals that game and a career long of 47. We didn't end up winning up there, but kept us in the game till late. And that was another moment of affirmation where I said, okay, I think I can do this. And then, of course, we launched into the Big Ten season and had a strong finish that year.
And then going into 1999, expectations were a little higher going into that year. You guys end up 7-5. You still had a strong season, went 38 for 39 extra points, 18 for 31 for field goals. You also were 1 for 1 passing the ball, 4 yards and a touchdown. Who'd you throw that touchdown to?
That was an interesting play. It was Chris Randolph that caught the touchdown. And, this is something that you practice maybe once, like on a Friday in a walkthrough where, the field goal gets blocked. Our tight ends hear the double thud, the kick, the block. And they're taught to release down the field and then get to the corner. And Chris Randolph did it beautifully. We got lucky in the sense that the block, bounced straight up, and I was able to kind of just turn 180 degrees and grab it, and then look over my shoulder, and I found Chris working towards the left corner pylon, and I just put it right out there for him. Kind of took me back to the high school days. And as I'm throwing it, I got smeared, and the rest is history. He caught it and scored, and then at that time, I think he jumped into the end zone or did some celebrating or something. So we got a penalty. And actually, I had to kick then a 35-yard extra point, I think, after sustaining my first concussion. but made the extra point. And yeah, that was a fun night down there in Orlando, and fun with all the hype that we came into the game. Dante Culpepper and Drew Brees, and we ended up just kind of putting a whooping on him. It was a nice night. So
yeah, looking back, that was a fun home series for you guys.
Yeah, it was. And of course, Dante was a great player, didn't necessarily have the talent at UCF then that they do now. But that was a fun experience for us. And it's always nice in the non-conference to get a team like that, where there's a little bit of, intersectionality in the rivalry. And it's not necessarily just a MAC team. Not that MAC teams, they've come in and upset us before at Purdue. So, they're strong as well, but it's nice to mix it up and do that.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you ex-players say that, because I know a lot of people are ripping Purdue's current schedule. This year they were supposed to play, of course, host Memphis, who is coming off a miraculous season, Air Force, another strong program, and go to Boston College. But I think that's fun from a fan standpoint.
Yeah, they really are. I think, as a fan and as a player, especially when you get those home and homes and you get to host them and then go to their place and see different parts of the country. I was blessed that I came from a family who traveled a lot. So for me, it wasn't eye-opening, but I recall having teammates that when we got on that plane for the game at USC, it was like the first time they'd ever been on an airplane, or first time they'd been west of the Mississippi. So I think there's something to be said for the experience of college sports. And of course we did that in baseball too, traveling all over the country to play teams. So I think there's a lot to be gained sort of off the field, just as a person and as a growing adult as well.
Also in 1999, you guys finished kind of on a sour note in the Outback Bowl against Georgia, up 25-0 at one point, ended up losing 28-25 in overtime. I know that wasn't one of your better games of your career. Just what was going through your mind after that game, I guess?
Yeah, let's talk about 2000. Look, if you're an athlete and you do it long enough, you're going to have a day like that. And that was my day. Missed 3 field goals, missed an extra point. And on top of all of that, I feel like our offense was humming in the first half. As you mentioned, we're up huge at halftime, and we're coming out with a lot of confidence. And then, then Georgia sort of finds a way to find some seams in our defense, and they start scoring, and it gets close late. And I wasn't able to, to come up clutch when the team needed me. So definitely a game that if I could have it back, I'd take it back and take a do-over. But again, you do it long enough. And, I look back at some of the great moments someone like Drew Brees had, and even he had, a 4-interception game. I think we won that game. I think it was Ohio State in the Rose Bowl year. But, you can't predict those. You work hard enough when you're training and practicing that you hope they don't happen often, because you're going to be out of a job. But, I was fortunate in a situation that my coaches and my teammates kept faith in me, and then the next year we come back and we bounced back collectively and had a big year.
Yeah, and I know one thing, you kind of hit on this in the Big Ten Elite program that was on the Big Ten Network, featuring the Rose Bowl team. You were on the 2000 team. You talked about a lot of backlash you got from the fans in that off season after that Outback Bowl. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, it was a tough offseason, and rightfully so. I mean, I think you walk a fine line when you're an athlete in college, because you're still sort of an adolescent. You're still an amateur as an athlete, but you're also out there representing your university, and it's a big money sport. And of course, the fans are passionate about everything, and especially as we started to get better and had the expectation to be winning regularly. The fans got on me that offseason, and I don't necessarily blame them, but there were some things that crossed the line. There was, some people talking about my family. There were some death threats that came in, but I think ultimately that sort of steeled me. Ultimately that gave me the little chip on my shoulder that maybe I needed at the time, that kind of me against the world outlook. And, my teammates rallied around me the subsequent year, the Rose Bowl year, and then definitely my senior year. as we became we transitioned to then becoming a really young team. And I was actually one of the senior leaders on that 2001 team. But I think one of the moments that really got me is when we walked into Mackey Arena for the end of season awards. And of course they announce everybody at halftime of a basketball game that got either an All-American or an academic All-American or some sort of recognition from the Big Ten. And I was, I think I was either All Big Ten, academic All Big Ten or academic All-American that year. And walk in and they announced it and the crowd's, booing. And that sort of got to me, I think. And I was standing there with Morgan Burke and he was congratulating me for the award. At the same time, the crowd was booing me. And he just kind of leaned over and whispered into my ear. He says, "Prove him wrong." And that was a really seminal moment for me as a young person. And of course, the late Morgan Burke now, it's sad to say that Morgan and Joe are gone, but these are the types of guys that Purdue has hired that have changed a lot of lives and were definitely influential in my life, and father figure type people that really helped me go from an 18-year-old wide-eyed kid from Montana to a mature man when I left.
So I can definitely tell you had a good relationship with both of those guys.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it wasn't always Cheerios and sunshine, but you don't expect that with a coach, And I think they were just always on my side, and I knew that. Even when they were kind of riding me, even when they were challenging me to be better, they were always on my side, and that clearly came through. And one of the things that I know and love about Morgan is that from Drew Brees, from the number one player on the football team, to the number 7 golfer or cross country runner or whatever in what you might think of as the least popular sport at Purdue, he knew everybody's name, he knew everybody's story. He took the time to talk to everybody after practice and competitions, and I think that speaks a lot to the family that is Purdue athletics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was something that us, Tanner and I, both not even close to being college athletes, we had no idea about any of that with Morgan. And when he passed away, unfortunately, those types of stories came out, and it was really cool to hear from your guys' perspective.
Yeah, he was always there. I mean, people, I think, accused him of being a fan, but why wouldn't you want your athletic director to be a fan, right? And I think, he approached the athletic director position maybe with a different lens than most athletic directors do today, but the landscape today is different than it was when Morgan was hired. And I think he really set the table for someone like a Mike Babinski to come in and be really successful. So, hopefully that's the case. We feel like we're on the right trajectory now. And once we get through COVID, we'll be ready to see the fruits of that labor start to come to fruition.
What kind of advice would you give to an athlete, or in particular a specialist that might be struggling a little bit and is getting some fan backlash nowadays through social media? Something that wasn't around when you were in college.
Yeah, gosh, I'm really glad there wasn't a Twitter back then. I probably wouldn't have been mature enough to bite my lip on that, but it's tough. It really is. And I think, some coaches and universities have approached it by not having their athletes be active on social media. But I think we're in an age now of athlete activism in a number of, realms, whether it be athletics or political or socio, whatever it is. So I think it's tough. I think you have to. I think the advice I would give, back to your original question, was sleep on it. If someone says something, don't react out of emotion. Don't react because you have to get the last word. But if you feel the need after you've slept on it, come up with something that's intelligible and sort of on target with a response.
Yeah, very well said. Social media can be a evil thing. That's for sure. And then we're heading into your 2000 season, your junior year, which ends up being a very special season for the team. You guys went 8-4, Big Ten champions, first time since 1966. I want to say first Rose Bowl appearance since 1966. You were 45 for 47 for extra points, 12 for 17 for field goals for 81 points. You also got your first punting action at Purdue, 13 punts for 652 yards. Interesting thing about this season, you guys had sky-high expectations. I mean, Drew's a senior. A lot of the offensive linemen are seniors. You got a really talented defense. You're more experienced at this time. You guys start out 3-2 with close losses at Notre Dame by score of 23-21 and at Penn State by score of 22-20. One thing I wanted to ask you about the Notre Dame game, this was you also touched on this on the Big Ten Elite documentary, was the fake punt play. that you said was you guys installed a go route during that week, and you and Vinny weren't on the same page. But Coach Tiller said nobody on the kicking team had any knowledge that was going on. I just kind of wanted what was going through your head there.
Yeah, it was something we had definitely practiced that week. It was installed, but I think looking back on it, that that wasn't the right time for it. They sort of gave me the freedom to alert Vinny if I saw what we had seen in film, and that was the guy that was covering Vinny, our gunner. He was bailing and turning his back early, and we thought it would be an easy connection. We're down there deep in our own territory. I think the ball was like at our own 15 or 20. The crowd behind us was loud. Vinny obviously had no idea that I had tried to communicate with him on this play, and he was off and running like he was going to go cover the punt. So, when I threw it out there, laid it out there, it looked just super awkward because he didn't know it was coming, and nobody else had heard anything I said. So yeah, I mean, that one's on me. Again, one of those moments, if you could have it back, you take it back, but also if it works, it's a very different story, and people are talking about how gutsy Coach Tiller is because he called a fake punt from the 20. So
absolutely.
These things sometimes make you look like a genius, and sometimes they make you look like a fool. And that was the latter for sure. But I think I don't take it back at all.
And then you guys lose to a Penn State team that was, I would say, pretty average that year. But like Coach Tiller mentioned, they were coming off one of their players, I believe, was paralyzed or partially paralyzed, and then he came walking out with the team. So that had to be such a raucous environment. Not that Beaver Stadium isn't already on that particular day.
Yeah, that was sort of one of those written in the stars type days. It was almost like Purdue, Ohio State a couple of years ago, when Tyler was on the field. It was like, well, how are we going to do this? But then again, I mean, you got to play the game, and they still had to come out and play, and they were a good team, and so were we. As you mentioned, it's always a tough environment. People ask me all the time, what's your favorite stadium that you played in the Big Ten? And they, I think, expect you to say like the Big House in Michigan. But to me, it's either Camp Randall or Beaver Stadium. I mean, those are the two where the ground shakes. At least for me as a kicker, when you're out there trying to tie the game late. They got that big erector set there at Penn State, and those pylons are driven into the bedrock, and when they get rocking, it feels like a 7.5 earthquake. So if I recall that game, I had a chance. Late. I think we were down maybe 9 to kick a field goal and get us within a touchdown, maybe mid to late fourth quarter, and wasn't able to connect on that field goal. So that was obviously a deflating moment, but also I think that was really a turning point. And that game as well is where we had some severe breakdowns on our punt team, and we didn't even get punts blocked. Like I got tackled on punts because I couldn't even get the ball to my foot. So that was a bad day for our special teams, and really a point where we had to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing? Like we're the weak link right now. And if we're going to get to our goals, which is a Big Ten championship and a Rose Bowl, it turns around now. And we had that conversation, I think, post-game in the locker room with Drew and the offense and the coaches. And it was really sort of a collective, we got to turn it around tonight. And we came out strong in Big Ten play after that, and we're able to secure. I think we went on a winning streak then until that loss up at Michigan State later in the year. So, of course, the magic October where we string off wins against Michigan and Northwestern and Ohio State. Kind of a magical year.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to get right into that Michigan game. You said you guys kind of had a coming to moment. Drew, the offense, coaches, everybody kind of came together. But then you guys find yourselves down 28-10 at halftime to Michigan. What was the mood at halftime? I mean, was everybody still cool, calm, and collected, or was there any panic, or somebody step up and give a motivating speech, or what was the catalyst to turn things around?
I don't recall any speeches. What I do recall, oddly enough, is that we had an air of confidence about us, even being behind 28-10, that we sort of – it was almost like we knew we were going to win, and that was an odd feeling to have. Michigan, I think they were ranked 6th or something at the time, and they had come, and I think it was a very sort of slow possession game. I think they only had 4 possessions, and they scored all 4. I think they were ahead 28 points on 4 possessions. So we must have been out of our mind to think that we were going to turn it around and win. But I do recall our offense being very calm, and Coach Chaney, coming in and being very calm as he talked to our offensive line and talked to our skill players and said, look, here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to dissect what they're doing defensively. And they had a very clear plan. We, of course, needed our special teams to step up. in the end, which we were able to fortunately do. And the defense, played huge and made some stops there, especially after the missed field goal, with a few minutes left, 3 minutes left or whatever it was in the fourth quarter. Our defense had to get a 4 and out and did. And then Vinny gets the punt return, needed a big punt return, got it, put us right back in position. So yeah, it was sort of a surreal feeling in the locker room. And then also there in the second half, like, hey, things are going against us. They're not all falling our way, but we're going to pull this out. And we did.
Would you say that 33-yard game winner against Michigan to win 32-31 was that your most memorable kick at Purdue?
At the time, for sure. I think ultimately, as I look back on it now, I think the kick my senior year in Minnesota, as time expired, just because of there's no way that can happen, right? With the ball on our 2-yard line and 14 seconds to go. There's no way that should happen. And if it doesn't, we don't go to a bowl game that year. We have a young team. And I think we finished 6-5 that year, if I recall. So we would have been 5-6 had we not come out with that victory. So that's the one I think, just sort of from the pure joy of it. Michigan was almost more like relief, but yeah, the pure joy of that kick at the Metrodome and kind of stealing one that we really maybe shouldn't have won was maybe the most memorable.
I know, going back to that Michigan kick real quick, I know on that documentary, when you were lining up for that 33-yarder, after you had just previously missed about 2 minutes before that, a kick darn near in the same position, you kind of said you knew this was a make or break kick for your career, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, given what had happened the week earlier at Penn State with our punt unit, and then you come into this game, if I had missed 2 field goals in the last 2 minutes and we had lost that game, maybe there's changes coming down the pike, or for sure we're in a battle for that position, the next week in practice. And that would have been a tough road to hoe. So yeah, I mean, I think as athletes, you always have moments where you're like, okay, this is a defining moment. And that was one of them. And actually, I missed the first kick, and then we come to the sidelines. I wish I hadn't had to come to the sidelines, but came over, and I was actually standing right next to Coach Tiller, and on the other side of me was Coach Downing, our special teams coach, and Drew was there until we got until the defense got the ball back for him, and nobody talked, nobody said anything. It was kind of weird, and it was almost like they knew I needed my own headspace, and I knew that they didn't want me to talk to them, and we were all just standing there. And normally, before a field goal, I would go and I'd warm up in the net and get 2 or 3 kicks into the net and then jog out on the field. But, one of the things that I felt on that first kick was a sense of adrenaline, and I was a little fast through the ball, which is why I pulled it left. So I said, you know what, I almost want to keep myself cold, not warm up, because then that'll sort of maybe, I don't know, I'm doing the calculus in my head, that might affect, some of the adrenaline I'll be feeling if I get another shot. So I just stood there and I didn't warm up. And again, we get the punt return, we get Drew gets us back down into range, and we make it. So it worked out. It was a good day for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of 3 field rushings at Ross-Age Stadium, which is still the most ever to happen in a single season. Doubt that will be broken. I don't know. That'd be pretty tough, especially with the new conference rule of fining schools when they rush the field. But anyways, what was it like playing in Pasadena?
I wish I could have taken more in. I think as an athlete, you don't maybe have the awe or the respect for it that you otherwise would, because you're very focused on your job. The week, the experience, flying out there on Christmas Day, and having the holidays out there with your family, and then of course getting to be in the Granddaddy and playing on that field that's like a putting green, and just the stadium and the San Gabriel Mountains right there. It's just it's iconic. So. Yeah, great experience. I haven't yet, however, 20 years later, I haven't yet watched the game. I probably should pop it in and just kind of watch it for the experience of that. But yeah, it's something I'll always be able to tell my kids about and be proud of, that we were the Big Ten champs that year and got to go play in Pasadena.
What was the mindset going into 2001 now that you're being the hunted instead of the hunter in the Big Ten?
Yeah, kind of yes, but kind of no, because Drew graduates. Almost our whole offensive line is gone. We're starting a freshman quarterback, freshman in the secondary, freshman receivers, and then we had an old, washed-up punter and kicker. So, I was kind of the daddy of the team that year. Me and Aiken were kind of the 2 guys that have been around forever, and Kelly Kitchell, who you guys know, had been around forever. So Yeah, I mean, there was some impetus on the part of the seniors to really kind of bring those freshmen up because we knew they had, a lot of talent. We just had to kind of get them going and get them in the right spots and see where the chips fell. And we also had some tough losses that year, but also some great wins that maybe we shouldn't have. So I think we probably cobbled together the best record we could that year in 2001, and we're fortunate to get a Sun Bowl bid and had a great time out there. And that was, I think, a nice legacy for our senior class who maybe wasn't as heralded as Drew and those seniors. Now, the interesting thing is when Drew and that senior class came in, nobody gave them any props, but they ultimately became a great class. And ours, actually, they gave a lot of national press to, and we had some folks that didn't either show up or kind of fizzled out or their jobs were taken. So, we kind of ended up as a transition class between that Rose Bowl team and then what would come, kind of the Kyle Orton, Stu Schweiger years where they were good again in 2003 and 4.
And individually yourself, you had a great year that year. You end up winning the Ray Guy Award, which goes to the best punter in the nation. 53 punts for 2,567 yards with a 48.1 average. And you had 22 of 27 field goals for 86 points, 20 for 25 extra points. So kept off your Purdue career probably just like you wanted to.
Yeah, it was a really good year. It was an even better year until we had that last game at Indiana. Well, it wasn't the last game because Notre Dame got moved because of 9/11 that year. But what should have been our last game was down in Indiana. And what I think a lot of people don't remember is it was an absolute monsoon. And that was back when they still had grass. And the way their stadium is set up, for the folks that know, Memorial Stadium down there in Bloomington, the water is just like trickling down and running onto the field and then running right in the middle of the field. It was like a bowl. And I recall kicking a field goal out there where Ben Smith, my holder, literally had to like brush water out of a hole and then get to the ball. And as the ball's coming and he's putting it down, the water's like rolling right back into the hole. It was right before halftime, I think. So, I missed a field goal in that game and I think only averaged, like 30 some yards punting. So that brought my average down. Up until then I had been just ahead of the Big Ten single season record, but ended up just below it. So no regrets. You play ball in the Big Ten, you're going to get some of those days, but we go down there and lose to Indiana. That's always a hard feeling for a senior class. But then we were able to come back up against Notre Dame. And I had a big day that day with 4 field goals to set the Big Ten record at the time. So yeah, a good close to the year and proud of myself, I guess, because, really a nice job of proving the naysayers wrong, but also helping carry a young team who really needed a boost on special teams. We had a lot of 3 and outs in our own red zone, and we needed to turn that field over and give our defense a shot. And I was able in a lot of cases to do that. And then, need points, right? You can't get down to the 30 or the 20-yard line and not come away with points with a freshman quarterback and a young offense. So to be able to deliver on that was, I guess we needed it that year, and I was able to do that.
What was it like going through a quarterback change during the season for the first time throughout your Purdue career to that point?
Well, I think when you're on a team, assuming you're not picking sides, assuming you're not buddy with one or the other quarterback, you try not to let that affect you. You try to just sort of have your blinders on and say, look, the coaches got our back. We're going to support whoever's out there. And of course, we did make that transition. There's not much you can do about it, whether it's the kicker, the punter, the quarterback, whoever it is. You got to support the guy that's out there, and you would hope the guy that got replaced supports that guy as well. So, I think that year we were all sort of trying to feel our way out and figure out how we were going to gel as a team, and ultimately we did enough to get that bowl streak extended.
Yeah, it started out 4-0, and then, like you said, had a couple tough, close losses. Could you tell, even as a true freshman, that Kyle Orton was going to be a pretty special quarterback at Purdue?
Well, sure. I mean, I think, you watch his recruiting video or you watch him in fall training camp and the kid's got talent. At the same time, there's a lot of quarterbacks that have talent that maybe don't find their way onto the field as soon as they should because they haven't learned the system or, they're not necessarily, leaders or whatever it might be, whatever the coach decides. With Kyle, you knew he kind of had it all. It was just a matter of time before it clicked for him. He also maybe needed an opportunity. He needed the guy in front of him maybe to not play well. And so he got his moment. And I think, he ended up having a great career, obviously, at Purdue, becoming a member of the Cradle and starting for those next 3 years then.
Before we get into talking about your post Purdue football career, you also played baseball at Purdue. How many years did you play baseball at Purdue? How many seasons, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I played in the spring and of my freshman and sophomore year. I was planning also to play my junior year, but at that point in time, it was the off season coming off the Outback Bowl. The optics of that wouldn't have been great, I think. And I really wanted to prove people wrong. I really carried that chip on my shoulder, and coming back into then, my junior season, the Rose Bowl year, I kind of wanted to just focus in spring ball and really show my teammates and my coaches and the football community that I was all in, that I was invested, and I wasn't off doing something else. There was always an option then to come back and play baseball my senior year or even my fifth year then if I had not had the opportunity to go play football professionally. So I didn't think of that as walking away necessarily. I thought of it as a break, a chance to sort of reset, refocus. But I ended up then, of course, having a couple of nice years building into my senior year and saw the writing on the wall that there would be a professional opportunity there. So didn't go back to baseball. It's not a regret. I wish I could have had more time playing baseball, but I think I handled it the right way in the most mature way that I could have. But I loved playing for Coach Schreiber. I loved my teammates. I lived with the baseball guys off campus. Matt Skripsky, one of our pitchers, and Dave Blomberg, our starting second baseman and Big Ten guy, all Big Ten guy. And so, like, mentally, socially, emotionally, I was more of a baseball guy than a football guy. I fit more with that team. But football was paying the bills, and I needed to be there. So yeah, I just played the first 2 years. But as you mentioned at the top, was fortunate enough as a starting pitcher. I think I had 4 or 5 wins as a pitcher, some relief appearances. I got some time at first base, hit a home run at IU, which was nice. So yeah, it was a good experience. I wish there could have been more, but to be a two-sport athlete in college is a dream. So
Absolutely, definitely at the Big Ten level. That's really impressive. After your Purdue playing days, you were selected. You kind of just mentioned during your pro career with a 4th-round pick by the Cincinnati Bengals, pick number 109. What was that day like? And do you remember that phone call?
That was an odd day. I do remember the phone call. In the lead up to the combine and the draft, you meet with a lot of teams. You take visits to their facilities, and I recall taking a number of visits and having interviews with maybe 31 out of 32 teams. The one team I didn't have an interview with or ever talk to or ever visit was the Cincinnati Bengals. So when the call came, we were all surprised. My parents were there, and my girlfriend at the time was there, and we're like, the Bengals, this is kind of out of nowhere. And I had also, during that draft process, indicated that I wanted to punt in the NFL, that I didn't want to be drafted as a place kicker. And so we get on the horn with Cincinnati, and they say, they're going to be our starting kicker next year. So not only was I surprised that it was Cincinnati, but I was surprised that they wanted me to kick. And I hadn't for the past 3 or 4 months been kicking much. I've been focusing on my punting and preparing for that angle to move into the league. So there was a pivot that needed to take place before that mini camp. And ultimately then I go down there to Cincinnati, and they had just drafted a kicker out of the Big Ten the year before, Neil Rackers out of Illinois. And he was still on his rookie contract, so they weren't going to cut him. So they had 2 kickers now that they had drafted that they weren't going to cut. So I was just active every week, but Neil ended up having a great start to the year, so they weren't going to replace him with me. So I was active and just kind of standing on the sidelines waiting for somebody either to get cut or to get hurt. And that was kind of an odd. Usually that doesn't happen in the NFL. They don't keep an extra kicker or punter. But so that was kind of an odd season. And then the next year, they let me go, and I was fortunate enough to land up in Green Bay and take part in that playoff season. We were in Philadelphia for that 4th and 26 play that they converted. Donovan McNabb converted to go, to the Super Bowl. Otherwise, might have had a Super Bowl ring with the Packers there in 2004, I think. So yeah, bounced around a little bit, and then spent a little bit of time on the practice squad in Minnesota, and ultimately finished with the New York Giants, and then 2 years over in Europe with the Rhein Fire in Dusseldorf, Germany. So, enough to get a taste of it, enough to know that, that it's a nice lifestyle, but maybe not a lifestyle that fit me real well. But blessed to have had that opportunity. And, by being drafted, it was able to, set me and my family up financially a little bit, or at least give us a head start in life and allow me to go back to grad school and kind of pursue some things that I had always wanted to do.
That's a great story, and really cool that you got to experience all of that. And I did see on the internet that you still compete a little bit. You're now a triathlete, or at least were at one time.
Yeah, haven't done one in a couple of years now because I have kids, infants and toddlers moving through that phase of life. But I've done 9 Ironman triathlons all over the world, from Germany to Mexico, across the United States. So Ironman, it's funny, most good stories start with a girl. This one does too. And when I came back to grad school at Purdue, I met Bree, who's now my wife, and she was a college runner at Northern Colorado, ran track and cross country, and she had herself gotten into triathlons and asked me to come train with her group one day. And of course, in all my confidence, I said, how hard could this be, right? I'm a two-sport college athlete, I'm a professional athlete, I think it's gonna be easy. And she managed to whoop my butt in those first few seasons, because I had never, I was not a swimmer, I was not a biker, and I definitely wasn't a runner, long distance at least. So she whooped me up and got me in shape, and now we love it. I mean, it's our way to stay competitive, keep that fire going, get out there and compete. And even as an old man last year, as a 40-year-old, I was able to beat all the young bucks in one of our local triathlons out here in Utah. So I'm still trying to hold on to that competitive fire, but it's a losing battle. Father Time's undefeated.
When you spent time over in Germany, I found your CV online. Is that what I saw? You had also, did you also study in Germany as well at some point?
I didn't study over there.
Okay.
I had a gap year between my master's and PhD. And at that time, my wife was doing a postdoctoral fellowship in Germany.
Okay.
We weren't married at the time, but so I went over and spent part of that year with her over there and worked for the university.
Okay.
It was kind of a gap year between my master's and PhD. So just a chance to kind of build out the resume and get some new experiences. And, Germany is like a second home. My dad was born in Germany, and I still have family over there. So chance to get back and experience that a little bit.
So were you a Bayern Munich fan before going over there, or have you always been?
Yeah, always. My dad and his whole family are from Munich. So definitely a Bayern fan, definitely enjoyed the game this week. And It's nice to see Bayern back on top of world football.
Absolutely.
I got a couple more questions here, then we'll let you go. Once again, we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us this evening. Any good Drew Brees stories from your time at Purdue?
Oh, a lot, yeah. Drew is just such a classy guy and such a competitor. He just doesn't like to lose, whether you're like getting in the car after football practice and driving down to a steakhouse, he wants to be the first one there. If you're playing ping pong to kill some time before practice, he wants to win, 21-0. He's just that kind of guy. And I think he was such a good fit for Purdue because of that. He was a guy that people wrote off because of the knee injury in high school. And he was a guy that you knew loved you, but also wasn't afraid to get on you. Right. And there were some moments where he got on me because, he felt, and he was right, that in those moments I wasn't living up to what I needed to do to help the team win. But he did it in a way that didn't degrade you. He did it in a way that sort of built you up. And I think it takes a strong leader to be able to do that. So I really love and respect Drew for that. So many stories I could get into. I don't need to get into the weeds on it, but we'll save that for another day. But I think the one thing that strikes me is he was just the right guy at the right time for the right university, and I think he knew that, and I think the university knew that, and it came together and happened how it was supposed to.
Besides Drew Brees, who was the best player you were blessed to play with?
So many, and I think it depends on the position. I mean, I think about a guy like Matt Light, who just really always brought his lunch pail and his hard hat and was just always on. No one ever made him look silly. He was just always on point, always did the homework, was always there physically. The guy that was just the biggest freak, I'd ever seen athletically was definitely Aiken Adel. Aiken was a guy that wasn't able to qualify right away, so had to go to JUCO and then come back. And I think he also carried that chip on his shoulder from that experience. I love watching all these guys grow up, by the way, meaning now as men, what they're doing in their lives. Aiken is just he's blossomed into an awesome human, and he's helping a lot of people. And that's on top of what he did in college and professionally as an athlete. And I just truly respect him for that. And then, one guy that I've brought up in past interviews is that maybe nobody else kind of thinks about because he was just a slow white guy is Chris Daniels. But Chris was a guy that always was there for the team when we needed him, that always just put his head down and went to work, that never complained after he had a game with 0 catches and never boasted after his game with 21 catches. He was just a dude. He was just on the team, and he was happy to be there. And I think back to him in like our 6 a.m. workouts. He was a guy that everybody looked to kind of set the tone. Nobody wanted to be there. Nobody wanted to be running at 6 a.m. on a February day, throwing up in trash cans, having coaches yell at you. But he was always a guy that sort of set the tone for the younger kids and did the work. And not only that, but the game we talked about earlier down in Tampa, his hometown, by the way, in the Outback Bowl. He was playing in front of 100 friends and family, and I'm sure would have loved to have won that game. But he was the first one to come up to me in the locker room after the game and put his arm around me and say, "We love you. You got this. Come back strong." And that meant a ton because he was a senior. That was his last game in his hometown, and he lost in a terrible way. But he was just like the consummate teammate. So those 3 guys, for 3 very different reasons, I think are 3 that stick out to me. And I could name 20 more. But it was just a wonderful family.
So I'm guessing you still keep in touch with some of your former teammates then?
Yeah, I do. Not as many as I would like, but Chris is one. His family and our family have watched each other grow up. He's been out to Utah and Montana to see us numerous times. We've had him at our cabin. We've had him up at Big Sky at our ski place up there, and out to our house in Utah. And we'd love to get out to Ohio and see his hunting lodge. We've visited them down in Tampa before, but we love he and Christy and their beautiful kids.
So I have a question. So I'm kind of following what you're kind of doing now. I think it's pretty awesome stuff. What kind of led you into wanting to really kind of dive into, focusing on youth sports and kind of the family aspect as you've gone through your career?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of fell into it. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I was a developmental psychology major as an undergrad at Purdue, and obviously as a student athlete, I mean, sports and psychology were 2 big, huge parts of who I was and what I was passionate about. So when my football playing days were coming to an end, I really felt like there was more in store for me educationally. And as I was thinking or reflecting on what would be a good sort of niche area to put myself or insert myself into, the overlap of those 2 areas just felt right. And I had taken an undergrad sports psychology class from Al Smith at Purdue University, and Al ended up becoming my master's and PhD mentor and is still a mentor and a great friend today. Al's up at Michigan State now, but so I sort of on a lark kind of contacted him and said, "Hey, what would it take to come back and start a master's with you? I'm kind of interested in this area." And the rest is history. So I was there for 2 years for my master's, took that gap year in Germany with Bree, and then came back for 4 years to do my PhD again with Al at Purdue. And I can't thank him enough for the trajectory that he allowed me to put myself on, the mentorship, the challenges that he put in front of me, knowing that I need to overcome those hurdles as an academic to really at a high level. And that's, I think, what it's all about. And those are the lessons as I reflect on my athletic career. It's those lessons, right? The lessons of having a hard day and bouncing back, the lessons of maybe feeling like an imposter, but pushing through nonetheless. The lessons of doing something for your teammates because it's the right thing to do. All of those things that you learn in sports are the same lessons I use today in my professional career, and the same things I use, as a parent and as a husband. So that's what it's all about in sports is, the Rose Bowls are nice, the rings are nice, the winning is nice, but those lessons are what carry us. And really it's, it's fun. Like I mentioned just a minute ago, it's fun to get on Facebook now and see the couple hundred teammates I had at Purdue and what they're doing and their families and how successful they're all being. And it's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. And I think Purdue does it the right way in that regard.
I got one more question before we let you go. And Evan knows it's coming. It's a corny question, but I ask everybody we've ever interviewed: is a hot dog considered a sandwich?
No.
Thank you. Thank you. I have had people say yes.
Well, So I mean, my dad's very literal. He's German, so he would probably define a sandwich as meat between two pieces of bread.
Right. Yeah.
So then the answer is yes, but then we would call it like I don't know what we would call it, but we'd call it something besides a hot dog, right?
Yeah. I think it's in its own category. So
that's something I didn't learn doing my PhD, so I don't know how to do it.
Well, that's how we do it on the Boiler Breakdown. You never know what's coming, but
someone from Frankfurt would probably know.
You're right. They probably would. Would. So, anything you'd like to plug before we leave here? Any handles that people can follow you on social media or anything?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in my personal life, my kiddos, we go skiing a lot. We have a lot of fun. They're into sports. I'm at Big Sky Boiler. That's my personal handle. And then my professional handle at the university, where we put a lot of our research. We talk a lot about kind of the cultural aspects of youth sports and college sports. That's at Families in Sport Lab, all one word. So yeah, those are our two Twitter handles. Otherwise, just look me up and give me a call. Would love to chat.
There you have it, folks. Thanks again, Travis. Really appreciate having you on the Boiler Breakdown.
I appreciate it, guys. I'm so sorry the football season is not happening as we all hoped, but let's keep our fingers crossed for the spring, and we'll get back out there soon.
Absolutely. Boiler up, hammer down.